Hi, so we talk about the second day of the World Cup, day 2, and the first game of the day was Egypt against Uruguay, the two favoured teams from the group containing the hosts. So it was, these two were very heavily favoured to progress. But with Russia winning yesterday, it was important that, that they both got off to decent starts. You had Uruguay, strongly fancied, and they ended up second in a strong CONMEBOL section behind Brazil. They, even despite the absence of Luis Suarez for the first 4 games and Cavani for the first 2. But it isn't just about Cavani and Suarez. There's Godin and Jimenez who marshal that centre of defence. So yeah, there was a bit more to them than that. They hadn't lost often. I think they'd lost 1 game within the last year. They were coached by the 71-year-old Oscar Tabarez, who'd been around, and he knew how to set his team up, make them difficult to beat. And he'd moulded a team now. He'd moulded a team with the experience. He'd been able to bring in some younger, more dynamic players as well to complement what they already had. His strike force had scored, all the strikers that he had at this tournament, I think they'd scored 107 goals this season, between them, the majority of course being Suarez and Cavani. But I don't think they'd won, interestingly, I don't think they'd won an opening game since 1970, so it was well long, it was well long and overdue. Egypt themselves would be appearing in their first World Cup since 1990. They were very impressive during their group campaign. They took advantage of a sloppy start to the campaign through from 2-time recent finalists, Ghana in 2010 and finalists in 2014. They were managed by Kupia, not the most popular of coaches amongst the fans and media. This is due to his very conservative, defence-minded approach. They were very good defensively. They'd conceded they conceded 22 goals in about 35 games. Even though they'd lost quite heavily to Belgium recently, 3-0, they'd been defensively solid, and that is the only thing that they'd struggled on was crosses. Between 21 goals were conceded from crosses, so that was something that they definitely needed to work upon themselves. So yeah, in terms of the match itself, it started off pretty cagily. Egypt's defenders not coming out too often. Uruguay themselves, but very sloppy. Nothing very uncohesive in terms of their play, their movement. Suarez, he missed a chance that he'd normally gobble up with his eyes closed. So yeah, it was very disjointed from in the Uruguayan attacks. Suarez probably performing the worst that many people had ever seen. He just couldn't get it together. He was misplacing balls. He was even being angry with himself. There was no rhythm. The ball wasn't being moved slow. So it wasn't. Egypt themselves, gradually, they started to play out, move out, and they gained in confidence. But there was definitely without their star player Mo Salah, which interestingly I didn't even mention at the start. But yeah, he suffered basically. They were missing their star performer, who was Mo Salah. He got injured playing in the European Cup final for Liverpool against Real Madrid. He just about boarded this playing to this tournament. I mean, even though he wasn't deemed fit, he was on the bench. But without Salah, you could see that they just didn't have the forward capacity to really trouble the South Americans. So yeah, all in all, it wasn't the greatest of first halves, and it was Suarez again for the start of the second. He had the opportunity to put his team in front, but the keeper did very well to come out and block the effort. And it was Egypt coming more out of the shell again. There were a lot of misplaced passes from both teams. It wasn't the most great game. It wasn't a great game on the eye, but still, it was. I mean, both were going along, and then there was Suarez again. He thought he had the chance again, but once again he was denied by the keeper. So it was trudging on. I mean, you couldn't see at this point that there was going to be any goals. I mean, the best player for Uruguay was Benacer, who was young, and he was by far the finest player for Uruguay. And then step up Cavani. He started to make more of an impact as the game progressed. He forced the best save of the match from the keeper. It was a fantastic effort, which the young keeper who justified his inclusion was equal to. And then we actually thought Cavani had broken the deadlock when, from a free kick, he hit his free kick and it came crashing off the post. And we thought that was it, and both sides were going to settle for a point. Both sides were going to get the point, which Egypt was so desperate for at this time. And then there was an unnecessary free kick that was given. The ball came over, and rising high was Jimenez to head and break the hearts of the Egyptians with a last-minute winner. It was going into and it just left the Egyptians so deflated, and and they need to pick up themselves in the following game, which would be against the host Russia. I mean, Uruguay seem to be on their way now, and there's no way you can see Saudi Arabia getting close to them in the following fixture. So yeah, unlucky Egypt, but Uruguay, I'd say slightly deserved, just about deserved this victory, as bad as some of their performances were from some of their leading players. Thank you.